Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Excited to be here today. We have some great information for you. We have Jill Knowles joining us, and we're going to be talking about women and wealth today. So, Jill, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Vicki.
Well, we're thrilled, and I know you got lots of great insight for us. So we'll jump into that in just a second. But I also want to take a moment and thank our audience. I know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to, and I know I always say that, but it is important for us to recognize how important you are to us and keeping our podcast going. So thank you for being here today. And let me give you a little bit of background about Jill so that you know who is going to be talking with us. So Jill has over 2 decades in the financial services industry. She's developed a breadth of expertise in investment and retirement planning, estate planning, and insurance needs analysis, which allows her to serve clients that have diverse needs, including those with more complex circumstances or more sophisticated objectives. Jill finds it particularly rewarding to empower women through the financial planning process, especially for those women with newfound independence, either through, a loss of a spouse, could be divorce, or simply, those who wish to make independent decisions on their own financial affairs. And we'll talk more about that as we get into today's segment, but really important to empower women. And Jill holds a number of certifications in, financial planning. There's so many, I'm not even going to say them all. So she's well versed, let me just say that. But she also lives in Burlington, Ontario with her 2 sons and is a very active individual with her family, but also personally enjoys getting out in nature, hiking, paddleboarding, reading, and I know golfing is a new thing for her. So she's a very active lady, not only in the financial industry, but also in her personal life. So Jill, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here today.
Thanks, Vicki, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Good. Well, let's jump in and let's get into some questions because I know we have a lot of, really great things to share with our audience. And, I just want to express, I met Jill through a connection of ours that is mutual and have been to a number of her women's events. And she really is passionate for educating and empowering women to feel confident in their financial acumen. And, we've had lots of conversations about, sometimes we let our partners make those decisions, or maybe we don't get as involved in it as we should because of lack of education or whatever reason it might be. And so it was really important to have Jill on our call today, on our podcast, to kind of demystify some of these things that come up, but also to educate us even more on what we can do to be, more financially savvy. So Jill, let's start with, what led you to focusing on women in particular? And what do you see as some of the biggest challenges when it comes to finances for women?
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. I should start by saying I've been doing this for over 20 years, so I don't just have women clients, but what I've seen over the years is this need to help women specifically because they're typically underserved in this industry. So over the years, I've had more and more women clients, and then as they've been happy with me, they've referred their friends and family that tend to be women clients. So it's just sort of gone that way. It didn't start out that way, but I do find it particularly rewarding. And I think it's because I approach it with a bit more of sort of an emotional intelligence piece versus just looking at finances. So that's just sort of something that's progressed over the years, and I find it really rewarding. And I think it's there's not a lot of women advisors in this industry, and so what I've been told is that people find me a little bit less intimidating. They feel like they can ask the questions they want to ask, and I think the reason for that is there's been this lack of, and I'll say, and you said it earlier, financial acumen. And thank you for using that word, because a lot of people say financial literacy, and I hate that word because it's kind of an ugly word. It makes me feel anyway that, it's something I should know or something I'm kind of missing out on. But I think financial acumen is just us improving our overall knowledge of finances and how we can empower ourselves to make our own financial decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Something you said there, I think is super important. And especially, I'm speaking as a woman for women, that emotional connection, because there is so much emotion that comes in with financial decisions, financial, how we approach it. We're a little more risk adverse. And so taking that approach of the emotional aspect of it is so important, because you're taking all of that into consideration. So it's the whole person, right? It's the whole situations
Right.
that you're looking at.
And I think with that too, there's kind of four main things that these life transitions impact, right? Like it's the practical, it's the emotional, it's family, and then it's financial. And sometimes in this industry we can kind of silo the financial piece. And I think we need to break down those silos and look at it as one. And especially as women, we tend to be caregivers, right? And maybe that's for our own children, maybe that's for aging parents. But all of those have these emotional and financial decisions to be made throughout those different transitions. But sometimes we can become so busy in doing the actual practical part of the caregiving that we're not always stepping back to make some of these higher level financial decisions when this caregiving is going on, and looking at it from the financial perspective.
Well, that's such a great point. And because you're distracted, right? Like, because you're in the moment, you're in dealing with the issues. And so sometimes it's hard to extract yourself and be that objective person when it comes to the financial aspect.
Right.
So I know
right.
you have taken on a lot of, and let's, Jill said this a minute ago, but let me just, amplify that. She doesn't just work with women, but she has taken on more widowed, divorcees, single women, single women with children. So, let's talk about what women can do to be more proactively in charge, or even when you are with a partner, how do we partner more on making those financial decisions?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned about, being single, going through a divorce. I don't know if you said the loss of a spouse, but I call all of these things, all of these kind of life transitions, money in motion, right? And it's usually some major event that's happened in life. There's some transition, and there's some sort of financial decision that needs to be made. And usually this comes at a very emotional time. We've lost someone dear to us, or we're going through, if we're going through a separation or divorce. I mean, that's a very difficult time. So there's all these things kind of coming into play, and you want to make smart decisions, but you're at this emotional kind of crossroads too. So I call all of that money in motion. And how do you start looking at that? How do you kind of be proactive on some of these things so that you're prepared? If you are dealing with a spouse right now and they tend to be the lead, and there usually is one person in a relationship that is the lead, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I would say making sure that you know enough about it, that if something were to happen to that person, or if there were a marital breakdown, that you know where everything's filed, that you know what's in the budget, that you know where your investments are held, where your insurance policies are held, and also that you've met some of your advisors in these areas, right? So like your banker, your insurance advisor, your financial advisor, your accountant, because these are the people that are going to advise you if you don't know everything and you need to sort of rely on them if something were to happen. So having an introduction, a lot of times financial advisors such as myself will do a financial plan, and sometimes that involves bringing the accountant in, or bringing a lawyer in, or things like that. So I always say to people, if you don't want to know the day-to-day about your investments, that's fine, but make sure you know sort of what the financial plan says, and that you and your spouse are aligned when it comes to what the family goals are for your finances.
Absolutely. And so often, sorry, I'm going to be a little bit of a downer, because so often I hear situations where someone's lost their partner and they had no idea. Like, I have one connection who their partner bankrupted them, and she had no idea whatsoever. I had another connection that her partner passed away and she had no idea how to even get into the accounts. Like she didn't even know where the accounts were. And that sounds like, oh, that silly person, but it's not, right? It's just that, to your point, one partner, it doesn't always, not always the man or not always the woman, but one partner usually takes the lead role. And so it is super important that we are aware of what is there and who is supporting those, investment decisions, the accounting decisions, the insurance, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
But, the other aspect to that, Jill, is in a divorce situation, because, that is very traumatic, just like loss. And I know you've been certified in, really specializing in helping individuals who go through divorce and helping them, figure out their estate and planning that. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah. Well, personally, I've been through a divorce. So I separated about 4 years ago, and I was, when you go through a separation, you have to do what's called financial disclosure. And I felt like I really knew what I was doing. I do this every day for a living. So I thought, great, this should be easy. And I knew how to do it, but it was a daunting, overwhelming task for me. And I thought, wow, if I feel this way, how would someone feel who doesn't do this day to day? Yeah. And that just spurred something in me, like I need to help other people with this. And so I looked into some different courses available, but the one that was sort of the most highly recommended was the Chartered Financial Divorce Specialist. And as soon as I read all about it, I'm like, I have to do this because I really want to help other people when they're in the same situation, because you're emotional. The task itself is daunting. Even if you were dealing with that not being emotional, it is overwhelming. And you may not have all the information, right? Because it's sometimes when there's a breakdown in a marriage, you're looking at the other spouse's pension plan and your pension plan and trying to bring all this information together. And it's not always easy information to get. And so helping provide some resources to people about where can you get that information and, what's a starting point at least, right? So I did that course. It took me just over 1.5 years to sort of finish it, but I felt really good coming out of that because it gave me a lot of tools. Financial planning is my background, so I was always starting everything with a financial plan. But when you go through a divorce, especially, you're not just looking at the division of assets and income today. It's how does this impact you 10, 20, 30 years down the road? Yeah. And so taking this real kind of long-term approach to financial planning to help you kind of make decisions today when there is a marital breakdown.
Yeah. Yeah. And that one, I mean, I've been there too. So you and I both have lived that experience, and it is right. Very daunting. And it's highly emotional because, there's, especially if you've been hurt in the situation, sometimes right. It's just, I just want to get it done. And so you're not thinking clearly and you're not thinking long-term. And if there's kids involved, that becomes an even bigger, risk that you take and not looking at long-term. And so, unfortunately, divorce is a reality in our world. And if I would highly recommend that because it will make your life easier in the long term of things. Right, so right, I think that was important that we talk about that, and especially the impact on women, because we tend to earn less than men overall. And, we're trying to be the caregivers and the workers and the providers of everything. And so it is super important that you get that support in helping you navigate those situations.
Yeah. So, and I was just going to say too, on that note, when you say women typically earn less than men, that means a lot more than just income today. That means less has gone into our RSPs, our pensions are worth less. So there are a lot of long-term effects to that. And I mean, we don't always put a value on that today, but when you go through a divorce, there's the evaluation period, right? And so all those things need to be taken into account. And these are not things that we're just are at the top of our head that we're thinking about, and especially not in a time when we're emotional. So I kind of like coming in as I call it the what if person, right? Like, well, what if we looked at this? What if this happened? What if this happened? And sometimes it can create a bit more uncertainty, but it also brings up things that we might not think about or that we might forget about when we're in an emotional state.
Yeah, such a great point. And I don't want to spend all of our time talking about that, but I think it is it's such a critical piece of information, because I think oftentimes we don't even know that that exists, and that there
Right.
is support out there that can help you navigate those types of situations. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
so thank you for that. So, you know, let's just talk about, how often we rely on partners to make those decisions. And it's quite a large percentage of women who rely on their partners. So what what happens when we do that? What are some of those pitfalls, and why is the mindset even in allowing somebody else to make those decisions?
I think, gosh, there's a lot that goes into that question, Vicki.
I know. Sorry, Jill.
A lot of it comes back. My personal belief is that a lot of it comes back to confidence. And where did that stem from? Probably sort of societal norms. I typically deal with clients who are 50 plus, and so I have a lot of clients in their 60 plus range that are part of the boomer generation, and that was how they grew up. So those were some societal norms as they grew up. I also don't think women were empowered at a young age to really look at financial resources or have this financial acumen, and so we didn't really question it. I do see generational change now. I do see people in their 30s and 40s making a lot more of these financial decisions. People are getting married later, so they're having to make some of these decisions on their own without a spouse. But if we look at kind of that boomer generation, it was them getting married early, the societal norms of the man manage the household finances. But now what I see, the other end of this, is men typically pass away before women. And so now these boomer men are passing away, and we've got a lot of women widows and who may not have managed money before. And now they're trying to think of, okay, how do I do this? How do I now step into this role? And some of this, you mentioned a couple stories, Vicki, but a couple that I've seen is where the husband and wife had a joint mortgage, a joint credit card, where the husband was the primary holder and the wife was the secondary card holder. And I don't know if you know this, or if a lot of people know this, but if you're the secondary card holder on a Visa or MasterCard, any type of credit card, you're actually not really building your credit score. You're building it for the person who's the primary holder. And so in these situations, there was a mortgage, the husband passed away, the mortgage ended up getting paid off through the mortgage insurance. So there was no more mortgage. The credit cards were wiped away because it was under the husband's name. So now the wife owned the home as the survivor, but couldn't get any debt in her name, couldn't even get a credit card because she had no credit score, couldn't keep the old mortgage because it had to be paid off because it was under joint name and he had passed away. So I've seen these situations where you think you're doing the right thing, and it's not a silly mistake. It's not like, in any case was this woman being foolish. It's just those were kind of the norms, and I think we don't talk about it enough. So the more we talk about it, I always say knowledge is power. The more empowerment we have through this knowledge, the more confidence we'll have, and the more we'll know to ask some of these questions. I always tell women when they come to me, make sure you have a credit card in your own name, even if it's just to put one tank of gas on a month and pay it off, because that's building your own credit.
Yeah, such a great point. And even with our kids, we do that now, right? Like, when they start off to university, it's getting them a credit card. And at first I was resisting it, I have to be honest. And it was like, no, Vicki, they have to do this. And here's why, and here's how they build their credit. And so it's no different, to your point. Like it's really making sure that you have things in your name so that you're building your own credibility, and I think that also plays into confidence, right? Knowing that you have something that's your own. So
yeah, exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about like savings, right? Like, I'll switch gears a little bit, because like I'm always on my kids about, if you get $100, put 50 in the bank and save it, or let's put it into your investment account and save it. And so I think, and especially it's an American mindset. to spend versus to
Mm-hmm.
save, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted us to just take a couple of minutes and talk about, like, even if you saved $25 a week, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what that compound interest can look like, or that money
Right.
compound over time. What can that look like, and why is that important for people?
Right, right. And I think you mentioned the key word there is compounding, right? So the compound interest, because if you had $5,000 in a bank account and it's making 5%, that's $250 for that year, right? And so people think, okay, 250, 10 years, that's 2,500. But if you are saving that interest, and then so after the first year, that 5,000 is now 5,250, and you're making 5% on that. And then the next year, right? Like it keeps going and going and going to the point where that compounding interest can save you a lot of money. And that's just even if you just took one initial amount and continued earning interest on that. But if you're continually putting money in and building that, you've got your growth on it, and then you've got your growth on the growth, if that makes sense, right? And so that's how that can start to build over time. And I think it's important, like you said, on breaking it down, making it a budget item on what does that look like in your budget? It doesn't have to be, here's $10,000 I need to put into a savings account. I think it could be, here's, $100 a month that I'm putting into an account. And, there's tax efficient accounts out there, whether that's an RSP or a tax-free savings account. But especially for, your children, someone in their sort of like late teens into their 20s, I think just the habit of consistently putting something away builds good character and builds some good financial decisions down the road, and you can get yourself a bit of a nest egg. And then goals are different, because I think maybe at first it's saving for education or a car, but later in life it might be saving for a home, or if you're planning on having children, maybe it's saving for your own children's education or being on a maternity or paternity leave, right? So there's all these different goals, and there's different tools and accounts that can kind of help you with the goal that you're working towards. So that, again, that comes back to your point earlier, Vicki, about just knowing what you want to do, explaining your goals to a professional, whether it's in banking, investing, accounting, and then they can sort of help you put the right tools in place for your customized situation.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And when you were just talking there, the other thing it made me think of is, like, sometimes when we rely on our partners to manage the money,
Mm-hmm.
like I have a few friends who will often say they're on an allowance. Even though they work, they may be on an allowance. So their paycheck goes into an account, and then their partner might give them an allowance. It's important for those individuals to also, whether it's $25 a week, it doesn't matter how much the money is. It doesn't have to be grand. It can be something small, but to have something that's like a nest egg for you, rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah,
And I know some people might hear that and go, who does that? But to your point, with the boomer generation, that's a very norm, right? And so
right.
it is important that you're always, have a little bit of something for yourself.
Right, absolutely. And having it in your own name. I think this has been the problem too, is that, there's a lot in joint name, and there's reasons for that from an estate planning purpose. So I think that makes sense. But having something that's in your own name, that's easily accessible, that's very liquid, almost like an emergency savings type of fund, I think that's important. And I think, having something like that, having some of these, having something for yourself gives you some options. Like, it gives you financial freedom. It gives you options. It just means you're not stuck. And so I definitely think everyone should have a little bit of something in their own name, and please don't put it under a mattress, because
yes, it could be found.
But yeah, have an account in your own name that you can access. But even more importantly, in those situations, I don't think it's a factor of sort of control. I think it's a case of there's been, in this case, maybe the husband was managing the money and the wife's happy with just, okay, I've got this much of the budget to manage whatever her duties may be, if that's groceries and kids and all that kind of stuff. But being part of managing the budget is empowering too, because then you know where everything's going to. Because if only one person knows about the rest of the picture, which would be, mortgage and property taxes and utilities, then you're just not learning that side of it. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to manage that, that's hard to learn at an emotional time. And so just ask the questions, try and learn as much as you can, and get involved to the level you want to get involved. At least know the overview, and then rely on the professionals for sort of the more detailed approach.
Yeah, exactly. So where can women go to learn more about finances? I mean, yes, they can go to their advisors, they can go, to their bank, financial management planning, but what else can they do? Are there resources, books, like different things they can, because one thing I hear often is I feel embarrassed because I don't know the jargon, or, I don't know what that means. And so it's that little bit of basic knowledge they can gain.
Yeah. And I think you're right. There's this intimidation factor out there. Like we'd rather not speak up if we don't know what we're talking about. Unfortunately, in my experience anyway, men don't seem to have this same issue.
No, not at all.
And again, this comes back to the confidence piece, because I have many friends who are male, who, have no background in finance at all, and will tell me things that they think I should know. And it's like, actually, I do have a background in finance and I do know this. And anyway, but it's just, we might express ourselves differently. So I think don't be afraid to ask questions. There are no stupid questions. It doesn't matter if you don't know the jargon. But there's lots of resources out there, sometimes too much. So the internet can be a bit overwhelming. Vicky, I am going to forward you some resources that you can forward to any of the listeners or viewers, so that they have that, because there's a few. There's a book I'm going to reference. There's a couple websites that are really good that are very specific to women, like Clever Girl Finance. There's a couple resources on budgeting that I think is really important. One of the things, Vicky, I've told you before, is that I'm part of the Scotiabank Women Initiative. And so it started as an initiative that was more towards women business owners. So it was more about getting more lending to women and better banking resources. But then the program did so well that we've expanded it to the wealth side as well. So there are a ton of resources on the Scotiabank Women Initiative site, and you can actually pick what kind of life stage you're in. So, it's not a one size fits all approach. So, you can choose kind of what life transition or what life stage you're in, and then find resources specific to that stage of life.
Awesome.
So that has a ton of resources, but I will send you some of those to repost. I haven't written a book yet. I would like to one day, but a colleague of mine out of our Toronto office wrote a book that's called Bank on Yourself, and I hope I got the exactly right, but it's what every woman should know if she's single, and even if she's not. I'll get the exact wording for you, but that's Bank on Yourself, why every woman should plan financially to be single even if she's not. And that's by Ardell Harrison and Leslie McCormick. And Leslie McCormick is an advisor out of our Toronto office who was part of writing that book. And so I think that's very important, because I don't think it's just single women who need to do this. I think we all need to do it. Sure. And it's okay to delegate, different priorities or duties of the household, but we need to have some general knowledge, because we may find ourselves in a situation where we need to deal with that. In the next 3 years, there will be $1 trillion that will change hands from men to women specifically. And that will either be from some of their boomer parents passing away, whether they're divorcing and there's a split in the marital assets, or a death of their spouse. And so women are going to be managing a lot more money in the coming years, and I think need to have some of these resources available to them to get the right people and professionals in place to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And women are also accelerating in their careers and
Absolutely.
are starting to make, not enough of us yet, but starting to make more money. And so we are going to be in charge of a lot more money in total. Excellent. Okay. So Jill, I know I'm cognizant of our time here, but so how does someone go about finding the right financial advisor or wealth management planner? How do you go about finding the right person for you?
Yeah, I think ask the questions. I mean, most people I see that come to me is because their friend said, you have to go do this
Me,
because
Jill.
financial planning and all this kind of stuff. So I think, asking around to people in your circle that would know, asking your accountant or your banker or things like that. Some of these resources that I'm going to send will have some questions on there as well. But the main questions to be like, once you do get in front of someone, don't just go to one person. I mean, it's an interview. You should be interviewing them as much as they should be interviewing you to make sure that there's a fit there, right? So I would say at least 3 people you should interview. And, the questions you want to ask are around their process. You want to ask about cost or fees. Mm-hmm. And how they manage money, like how are they going to earn you money and then sort of report on that or measure that. And then the big one that a lot of people I think forget about, which is super important, is the client service piece. Like what are you going to get that will make you feel good about being with this person? Are you able to ask questions without feeling intimidated? Are you able to ask questions about specific products or services and get the answers that you need? I think just how often are they going to contact you, right? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that do these financial plans and don't look at them for 10 years. That's not a financial plan. You have to work your financial plan. So what's the contact schedule? So I think a lot of that falls under the client service piece. And then you just want to deal with someone that you have a good fit with, right? Like people like to deal with people they like, people they know, and people they trust. And I think, you can discern that in a first meeting with someone if you get a good feeling about that or not. So talk to a few people, don't just talk to one person. And I think that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, I would agree. It is a personal fit for sure. And don't just go with the person that your partner had. Like that one, I'm just going to throw in a personal experience there. I did that and I lost a lot of money because I went with the person my partner had gone with, and he was not the right fit for me because we had very different views on investment. And it is really important to have somebody that like, and trust. And so, do that homework, be involved, and, make sure that you feel good about the person you're with.
70% of women actually leave their financial advisor after their spouse has passed away or there's been a marital breakdown. And the reason for that is the goals typically don't align.
Yeah.
Or they may not, the spouse may never have actually met the advisor. Like maybe the advisor only addressed the husband, right? Or dealt with the husband. And so all of a sudden now when it's, the woman who's the survivor or the person left after a marital breakdown, they don't even know this person. And so 70% of women leave their advisors. And I think that's something to know. And so, aligning yourself with someone who has the same goals as you, or at least understands your goals and knows how to help you achieve them is very important.
Yeah, I would agree. Big time. So what would you like to leave our audience with today? What would be one thing they could do today that would have an impact on how they look at finances or how they view their financial acumen? I'll leave that up to you. How would you like to express that?
Well, I would say read the resources I'm going to send over and set yourself a goal for reading something on that once a month. And find something that's specific to you, because there's lots out there. So find something specific to you. But I also think asking the questions. So if you haven't met your advisor yet, please meet your advisor and do a bit of an overview. If it's your spouse that does manage the finances, ask your spouse, where is everything kept? And, what should I know about this if something were to happen to you tomorrow? Like, what, ask those questions to make sure that you know how to access everything. Because I've seen a lot of that too, where, if someone's gone, all of a sudden it's, where's the safety deposit key, and where's this, and where's that, and where's our insurance policies? So making sure you know where everything is. And then, just don't be afraid to ask questions. Mm-hmm. I've done it too. I've been in that same situation where I'm in a room full of men or people that I feel or perceive to be smarter than me, and I don't ask the questions I want to ask. But I've learned to start doing it. It's important. Ask the questions, because you'll get the answers you need. And I think it's usually less intimidating than we think it's going to be. And it'll provide some peace of mind, because you'll have some answers. So I don't know who you ask. It might be your spouse, it might be your accountant or a banker or an investment advisor, some sort of professional, but ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, because you have every right to ask those questions.
Yeah, great advice. And know that if let's say you went to like a financial conference or something your bank was hosting, ask the questions there too, because guaranteed somebody else in the room is wanting to ask it and they're afraid to ask it. So you're helping your fellow person out by doing that. Those are really great feedback. Yeah. That's really great feedback, Jill. And, we have listeners who are outside of Canada. So, it still applies. Like, go to your local area and, your local banks or financial institutions, and you can get more information. Or, Jill, how can people reach you? Like, if people want to tap into you to ask further questions, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so we have our website, which hopefully, Vicki, you can share in the chat for here, and my LinkedIn page, which is under Jill Knowles, and it's Scotia Wealth Management, so you can find me there. I've also just recently started a page just compiling some financial resources specifically for women on Instagram, which is Knowles, my last name, Knowles, Knowles Knows Wealth. So if you want to look me up on there, it's just starting out, but I'm just trying to post some financial resources that people can utilize there too. And it's very sort of women specific. So there's
awesome.
All those different places.
Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate that. So you can find Jill. She's with the Sharpe-Way group at Scotia Wealth Management. You can find her on LinkedIn at Jill Knowles, Knowles, or on Instagram, Knowles Knows Wealth. That's a mouthful, but I love that. Knowles Knows Wealth. That's terrific. Well, Jill, thank you. This has been terrific. Lots of really, really terrific information. I hope that our audience, you have found some nuggets here today that's made you take a step back and go, I don't know where this is, and I need to find that out. And today's the best day to do that. I will just say that, because we never know what can happen. So important to know these things ahead of time before you get into a situation where you absolutely need to have the information. So Jill, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your time and your knowledge and your wealth with us. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you. No, it was an absolute pleasure, Vicki.
Awesome. Thank you. And our audience, thank you for being here. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. I'll share those with Jill, or you can reach out to Jill directly. I know there's, when we get off these podcasts, there's always, I wish you'd asked this question. So feel free, just reach out to one of us and ask the question and we'll get back to you. But thank you. Thank you for choosing WIL Talk for your podcast listening. And if you have questions about your leadership, feel free to go on to WIL Empowered, that's 1L, and take our free leadership quiz. It'll give you some insight as to how you're leading your life. And let us know how that turns out for you as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you at our next podcast. Take care.